No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property, without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. Over a century ago, this was stated in the 14th Amendment and was supposed to change the lives of the African American race and provide them with a free, just life. However, this clearly had not been the case. African Americans were forced to defend themselves through organizations such as the Black Panther Party. By the 1960s, the unequal treatment of African Americans became a societal norm. For instance, at work, African Americans only made half the profit of white Americans and had double the chance of ending up unemployed. After the decision of Brown v. Board of Education, there were only 49 desegregated Southern school districts. Also, less than a quarter of blacks in the South were able to vote, and in some of the surrounding places, they were not even granted the right to serve on grand juries or trial juries. In 1963, it was found that 10 people who were involved in racial objection movements were killed, 35 black homes and churches had been firebombed, and 20,000 blacks were jailed while playing an active role in civil rights protests. On October 15, 1966, in Oakland, California, Malcolm X, a black militant revolutionary who was not afraid to speak out against the oppression of the black community, was wrongfully assassinated. This inspired two African Americans, Bobby Seale and Huey Newton, to proudly and energetically stand up for their race by creating and leading the Black Panther movement. These men refused to watch their communities fall victim to discrimination and police brutality. The amount of protests and riots calling out segregation, employment prejudice, and police brutality had skyrocketed from Georgia to Mississippi and from Tennessee to Alabama. At first, their goal was to stop police brutality in their neighborhoods by patrolling the streets, but then they realized that what was going on was much more than police cruelty, and they needed to do something about it immediately. African Americans were being denied their basic rights, such as an equal education, housing, employment, and civil rights. Stories rapidly spread about a 16-year-old black male who was shot in the back by a policeman and a 13-year-old boy who was also shot while peacefully riding his bike. Huey Newton and Bobby Seale knew that it was their job to take a stand on behalf of those who were unwilling or unable to right the wrongs. After seeing leaders such as Martin Luther King's peaceful protests and hearing his powerful speeches, they thought it would be most effective to take a different approach, a more violent one.
Patrol the police, people might imagine we were right behind a police car. No, we might be 4 or 5 blocks away. We just drive through the community, and if we see the police arresting somebody, we were going to get out of the car with our shotgun.
The Black Panther Party quickly evolved into a Marxist revolutionary group that believed all African Americans should be armed, exempt from the draft, financially compensated for centuries of oppression by white Americans, and released from jails. The Black Panthers first started off with 6 black men: Elbert Big Man Howard, Sherman Forte, Reggie Forte, Little Bobby Hutton, Huey Newton, and Bobby Seale. They believed that violent force was necessary in order to stand up to the U.S. government and fight for the equal rights that they deserved. However, the Black Panthers quickly evolved into a large organization that strived for change through socialist means and embraced community programs. Each one of these men stood with dignity and courage and never once backed down when confronted with racism. The Black Panthers under Huey Newton and Bobby Seale began their fight with a strategy. They were determined to gain racial equality by forming their famous 10-point plan, which described all of the party's desired results from the revolutionary movement and aided them in their stand against racism. Some of the key points discussed were how blacks should receive full employment, decent housing, a moderate education, free health care, and liberation from prison. The Panthers believed it was their responsibility to obtain these rights for African Americans. Huey was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, assault, and kidnapping, and received a sentence of 2 to 15 years in prison in October of 1967. While he was in jail, his friend and fellow Panther, Eldridge Cleaver, began the Free Huey movement in North America, which lasted 3 years. The various rallies included tens of thousands of people and transformed Huey into a revolutionary icon, and the African Americans all over the world looked up to him as the man who refused to allow the continuation of white supremacy and was brave enough to do something about it. By 1970, the Black Panthers had supporters throughout 30 national groups in Los Angeles, Chicago, Illinois, New York, Seattle, and Washington, whom were all willing to do whatever was necessary to stand up to the injustices that were inflicted upon them. These followers effortlessly believed in their leader and fought against the unfair trial procedures of which he encountered. As a black man, Huey Newton was not given the same rights as a white man to a fair jury and therefore was most likely wrongfully accused. The black community refused to allow a fellow African American to be wrongfully sentenced for up to 15 years and decided to fight back. H. Rap Brown, also known as Jamil Al-Amin, and Stokely Carmichael took a stand and delivered speeches honoring his name on February 17, 1968 at the Oakland Auditorium. Taking inspiration from the first 3-hour rally, many other rallies began to occur throughout 20 major cities at U.S. federal district courts. These rallies, as well as new propaganda, became more popular as time went on, and the amount of newspapers being printed had been increased to 250,000 by 1971. Other propaganda such as speaking tours, slogans, posters, leaflets, cartoons, buttons, symbols, graffiti, political trials, and even funerals aided in the growth of support to their cause. They also spread their ideas through the establishment of TVs, radios, and print media. The Black Panthers refused to be ignored. As a result of all this propaganda, the Panthers reached their peak membership of 2,000 people. As more people joined the party, the group resisted black inequality more and more. The African American race refused to back down from the fight for racial equality. Despite the Panthers' struggle to gain equality, they remained charitable to the black community. As a direct response to the war on poverty in the United States, many African Americans made sure to provide the rest of the black community with housing, food, and safety. In January of 1969, the Panthers released their first Panthers Free Breakfast for School Children program at St. Augustine Church in Oakland. During the same time, the Black Panthers opened another breakfast program in Vallejo, California, with 35 children, and within 1 week, the number of children increased to 110. While the government took a back seat in aiding black communities, the Black Panthers drastically improved their conditions. By the end of the year, they had created enough kitchens to feed over 100,000 children each day before school had begun. Additionally, in Chicago, Fred Hampton created 5 different breakfast programs on the West Side, helped to create a free medical center, initiated a door-to-door program of health services which tested people for sickle cell anemia, and organized blood drives for the Cook County Hospital. He also encouraged the local gangs to avoid crime and help the community instead. In March 1970, co-founder Bobby Seale published the novel Seize the Time while imprisoned after yet another unjust trial towards the black inferiority. This memoir shared the story of the Panthers and their leaders, specifically Huey Newton, and it quickly gained popularity and helped the party gain support. It further strengthened their ability to take a stand against racial prejudice. In the following years, due to the death of multiple Black Panther leaders, external attacks, legal problems, and internal schisms, the party weakened and eventually fell apart. However, their stand in history will never be forgotten. The only laws that were passed related to the Black Panthers were ones used to fight against the party. For instance, the Mulford Act became a law through Governor Ronald Reagan, which was supposed to aid in the end of the Panther police patrols.
Charges of conspiracy and felonies on everyone who went in to exercise a constitutional right and said they had no right to bear arms in a public place. The California Penal Code section 12020 through 12027 and also the Second Amendment of the Constitution guarantees the citizen a right to bear arms on public property.
Although the Black Panthers were never able to gain support from the government or legislation, they were able to produce impressive outcomes, some of which included the free breakfast programs, Emergency Response Ambulance Program, Drug and Alcohol Abuse Recovery Program, self-defense lessons for the communities, cheap health care, free medical clinics, improved education, and less gang violence. The Black Panther movement also inspired many modern-day revolutionary movements relating to black equality. For instance, there are currently millions of people fighting for equal rights in the Black Lives Matter movement. These movements are still fighting to ban discrimination and still attempting to reach their goals today. The Black Panther movement may not have ended all race inferiority ideas, but overall, they've had a great impact on the movements as a whole and have encouraged others to come forth and fight for what is right. When people take a stand, as seen in 1966 with the formation of the Black Panther Party and again in 2013 with the Black Lives Matter movement, the world changed for the better. Many members dedicated their lives to ensure African Americans would have the right to a free and just life. Unlike many other leaders, Huey Newton and Bobby Seale refused to allow the continuation of black oppression and began taking serious and dangerous precautions to aid in the development of an equal status between blacks and whites. Panthers will forever be remembered as the men who fought for what was right when no one else would. These men took a stand. Brave, noble, unafraid. The Black Panthers.